All right, looks like we are live. Welcome to Standing for Truth. I am your host, Donnie, and I want to thank everybody for being here for the next chapter in our evolution debate series. We have an earlier one today than usual, and I've got Nick from the Planarwalk YouTube channel and Dr. Dino debating evolution. What is the best evidence for evolution? And before we get right into the fun, what I like to do typically is kind of get to know the debaters a little bit, break the ice. And Nick, since it's your first time on the channel debating here on the platform, I do appreciate you being willing to engage in this important topic. Why don't we start with you? A little bit about you, a little bit about your channel.
Okay. Well, I'm Planarwalk. I should probably start with a hoi hoi. I'm Planarwalk because that's usually how I start. And I make videos usually about different types of pseudoscience, a lot about flat Earth, because I think we can all agree that flat Earth is quite silly. So, but yeah, just all kinds of different things that I think are silly or pseudoscientific, and I look at the evidence and all that kind of stuff.
All right. Well, I appreciate that introduction there, Planarwalk. I've got your YouTube channel link in the description box. So for anybody in the chat, if you like what you're hearing from Planarwalk, check that out. Dr. Dino, good to see you. How you doing? A little bit about yourself, a little bit about Dell.
Well, thank you, sir. I'm Ken Hovind in Lenox, Alabama, a little bitty town straight north of Pensacola. I've been a Baptist preacher 48 years. I taught science 15 years in high school. I defend the position that the Bible is literally true. I would agree with Nick 100%. The earth is round. It is not flat. Only Kansas is flat. The rest of it's round. I think that is pseudoscience. I think it's also pseudoscience to believe in evolution. I'm excited. If he wants pseudoscience, by the time we're done today, he'll be producing videos against the dumb religion of evolution. That'll be great. All right.
All right, Kent, appreciate the... Should be a good one. Appreciate the introduction, Kent and Planarwalk. So for the audience sake, what we are going to be doing is more of a free-flowing kind of back and forth debate. We're going to have short opening statements introducing the topic, introducing a point or two for the debaters, Kent and Nick, to discuss. And of course, we are going to be starting with Planarwalk with that. And as usual, we're going to have an audience Q&A at the end of the debate. So make sure that you're tagging me with your questions. Tag me at Standing for Truth, and that way I won't miss them. Okay, let's get right into it. Planarwalk, we're going to hand it over to you. If you have any slides, anything like that, of course, I can share screen. And whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I do have a few things to show, but first I have a few questions that I'm going to be asking Kent. So for this debate, I want to focus on evolution, macroevolution. Now, I'm not a big fan of the term macroevolution, but we'll use it just for the purposes of this debate. The first question that I want to know is what genetic mechanisms are there to prevent macroevolution from occurring over a long time frame? We all agree that microevolution can occur. Small changes that may not change things too much. But is there any genetic reason why macroevolution shouldn't occur? That's my first question. And the second question is what environmental mechanisms might prevent macroevolution from occurring. So there's plenty of different environmental evolutions that actually environmental mechanisms that can actually facilitate macroevolution. Things like when two species get separated, you'll often see them change in very different ways. There's also I forgot half of them from my school, but that's one of the main ones that I can remember. If I can share my screen now.
Now, is that a question or two that you wanted Kent to address and engage now, Planarwalk, or is that kind of for later to address after your presentation here?
I will address those after the presentation because
sure,
Kent has a bit to respond, right?
Yeah, no worries.
Yep. So if I can just share screen and hold on, give me a few seconds. Okay.
Looks good.
So when it comes to one of the things that I want to talk about isochrone dating, because isochrone dating is a very good way for measuring the age of rocks. Isochrone dating, for different types of dating, you've got argon dating, you've got I forgot all the different ones, but isochrone dating uses different dating methods, and you want to look at the isotopes in a particular rock. Now, if there has been contamination of the isotopes, or if there's been contamination of the rock, then you should see the isotopes not lining up. However, if the rock is just as it is from the ground, without any contamination, then the isotopes should all line up. This is ratios of different isotopes in the rock. This is what this shows. And this is far better because you can tell, okay, has there been contamination? Has this particular element leaked out of the rock or something? We do this with carbon dating to an extent as well. If we want to see, okay, because there has been an unusual amount of carbon in the atmosphere lately, how much carbon in this rock is due to that, and has it been contaminated by the higher levels of carbon? We can look at carbon 13, I think it is, see how much of that is in a carbon life form to determine whether it's recent or a long time ago. We look at the ratios of all these things. If the ratios line up, we can tell that it hasn't been affected by contamination. Another thing that I want to look at is chromosome 2. So chromosome 2, we find that there is on most chromosomes, there are 2 sets of telomeres and 1 centromere. On chromosome 2, however, there is a hidden telomere there that we can find, as well as a hidden centromere. I forget the correct name for it, but there's these things that show that these have been fused. These 2 chromosomes have been fused. And we can look at some other of the great apes and see that they have 2 separate chromosomes where we would expect to find chromosome 2. And this is good evidence for us having a common ancestor with other apes. Another thing that I want to look at is ERVs, endogenous retroviruses. These are something that we've got heaps of ERVs, but there are particular ERVs that are in the same ERV in the same spot between humans, chimps, gorillas, orangutans, etc. And if this happening by random chance, 2 different species getting the same ERV by random chance is astronomical. I think it's 1 in 50 million of the same ERV being in the same place. And yeah, so that's all I...
Sure. Looks good. Planarwalk, dating methods, specifically isochrone, chromosome 2 fusion, endogenous retroviruses, and a couple questions relating to micro and macroevolution. So a few topics there for us to engage. Before we do so, we'll give Kent equal time. That was about 6 minutes. So Kent, we'll hand it over to you. 6 minutes. Floor is yours.
Right. That's why I thought we agreed on 1 topic at a time. We already have 3 on the table. I can't answer all 3 in 6 minutes. I much prefer a whole debate be on 1 topic. I think the reason he chose the carbon-14 or the dating methods first is because he probably knows full well, without billions of years, his whole theory collapses. It doesn't matter what changes we see in animals or plants. If you don't have billions of years, they cannot add up to what he needs of everything being related to a common ancestor. So that's where the issue of the age of the earth is absolutely critical to the atheist, they have to have billions of years. And if you take that away, it's just like taking a pacifier out of the mouth of a baby. They holler and scream. They've got to have that pacifier because in their mind, time solves everything. Truth of the matter is time makes it worse. The longer you wait, the more things decay. Things wind down. The earth slows down in its spin. The moon recedes from the earth. The oceans fill in with salt. There are thousands of indicators the earth cannot be billions of years old, but they need billions of years to make it look good. Radiometric dating is used on certain types of rocks. I cover this in great detail on my video number 7. In my series, you can get $50 the whole thing. It's Q&A, questions and answers. It's actually 5 hours long, 2 different DVDs, just covering these type of questions. Igneous rock, metamorphic rock, sedimentary rock. I taught earth science 15 years. I love studying rocks. I live in a gravel pit. We got all kinds of them here. So there's all different types of rocks. In 1830, a guy named Charles Lyell said all these rock layers are different ages. Stop right there. There's where the mistake came in. They say the top layer is younger. Stop. How can it be younger? Where's it coming from? This whole geologic column that they rely on does not exist anywhere in the world except in the textbook. It's pure imagination. There is no geologic column. There is no Jurassic age. There is no Triassic, Mississippian, Devonian, Silurian. It's all baloney. Every time people come, we flip this thing over. It'll form 10 or 15 or 20 different layers in minutes. Is the top layer younger? No. So, Nick, you've been taught something that is absolutely baloney. There is no geologic column. None of the layers are different ages than any other layers. And if a rock is blown out of a volcano through becoming magma or igneous rock, it lands on top, it's still the same age. It was the same material recycled. It doesn't change it. If I shuffle a deck of cards, that doesn't make the top card younger. But you guys are stuck with this idea that the geologic column, invented in 1830, is science, and it's not. So potassium-argon dating, rubidium, strontium, lead-208, lead-206, all the dating methods, carbon-13, carbon-14, are based on some really wild assumptions. In the 1950s, they developed carbon dating. And Willard Libby did this. 1946, Willard Libby said, I think we can check and see the age based upon the isotopes of radiocarbon, carbon-13, carbon-12, carbon-14, etc. So they tried to make this. The accepted ages for the rock layers was set back in 1830. Then 120 years later, they try to carbon date them. And if your carbon date doesn't match the accepted date, it'll be rejected because the accepted date was already accepted. And this is where the problem comes in. Carbon dating, conclusion. The underlying assumptions should be that fully half of the dates are rejected. Why don't they accept half of the dates they get from carbon dating? They don't match the geologic column. And the geologic column doesn't exist anywhere. It's imagination. So they start off with a lie that the layers are different ages, and now any dates that you get have to match this stupid column. Radiometric dating would not have been feasible if the geologic column had not been erected first. They've known this for 40 years, okay? Ever since William Smith, fossils have been and still are the best and most accurate method of dating and correlating the rocks. How do you tell the age of the rock? By the fossils, not by carbon dating. Apart from very modern examples, which really are archaeology, I can think of no cases of radioactive decay being used to date fossils. This was 40 years ago. Nothing's changed. There are 38 elements that are radioactive, and you can study this the rest of your life. Okay, there's uranium-238, uranium-235, rubidium, strontium, lead, etc. These things are radioactive. They decay into something else. I agree. I understand. All right? So carbon is one of them. Potassium-40 decays to argon-40 at a certain known rate. About half of it would decay in a certain rate, we think. Assuming no contamination, assuming the rates remain the same, assuming there's been no other outside forces to change this, and assuming none of the daughter element was already in the rock but the creation of it. I think that's a far stretch. Carbon-14 decays to nitrogen-14 in 5,730 years. Okay. This is used to date previously living things. So carbon dating only works on things that used to be alive. Okay. Earth's atmosphere is about 300 miles thick, but only 10 miles contains nearly all of it, okay? Most of Earth's atmosphere is within 10 miles. Our atmosphere contains mostly nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and a little tiny bit of carbon dioxide. Three naturally occurring isotopes of carbon on Earth. Carbon-12 is 99% of all the carbon. Carbon-13, which is 1%. Carbon-14, occurs in trace amounts, making up 1 atom per 10 to the 12th atoms. So 1 atom out of 1 times 10 to the 1.5 times 10 to the 12th is 0.000000, very little radioactive carbon-14. And that's what they're trying to determine the age of objects with, carbon-14. Guys, you can barely find it and measure it. Earth's atmosphere is mostly nitrogen, carbon dioxide, 0.000765%. A little tiny bit of that is radioactive carbon. It mixes with the other gases in the normal atmospheric movement, and that gets absorbed by plants. Plants breathe it in. I could take the whole debate just on carbon. Nick, you brought up 3 topics. My time's up. Which one would you like me to answer? Go ahead.
Okay, just 1 second. Let me, 6 minutes really does fly by. So I got questions flying in, and I am saving them. So I appreciate the questions coming in for an audience Q&A. So yeah, let's engage these points. Looking forward to this. Nick, let's hand it over to you, for a response, and just kind of go back and forth on one until we've hit them all. So here we go. Floor is yours.
Okay. So I'd like to start with what genetic mechanisms prevent macroevolution from occurring over a long time frame. That would be the first thing that I'd like to, because if we can agree that macroevolution, because I'm not sure if Kent agrees that macroevolution can happen, so I want to see if we can agree on that first, if given enough time. So.
Oh, very good. Thank you, sir. One of the many things I do in my seminars and in my debates, I just define, what are we talking about? What do you mean evolution? And thank you so much. It's a great question. Organic evolution is a real serious problem. How did life get started? That's slide number 89. I break the word evolution up into 6 categories or stages or levels. You have to have cosmic evolution. You have to have time, space, matter created. Where did matter come from? I don't think you guys have an answer for that, but that's not this debate. But really, that's part of evolution. Then chemical evolution, because their theory says the Big Bang produced hydrogen, maybe a little helium, and tiny trace amounts of lithium. How do you get uranium, gold, silver, platinum? How do you get all the life? How do you get all the 92 elements, plus the synthetic ones, out of hydrogen? Then you have to have stellar evolution. The stars have to form. Nobody's ever seen that. Then you have to have organic evolution. Life has to get started. Nobody's ever seen life come from non-living material. We can't even make it happen, okay? And if they did make it happen in the laboratory, that would only prove it takes intelligence to make life. So those are the first 4 meaning. Then macroevolution is where we change from one kind of animal or plant into a totally different kind of variety. We see a lot of variations happen. There are now 500 recognized breeds of chickens, okay? They might have had a common ancestor called a chicken. But in the evolutionist mind, seeing 500 varieties of chickens is demonstration to them that chickens are related to bananas. There are 1,000 varieties of bananas that mostly cultivated by man to produce, to stand the hotter climate or wetter soil or whatever, but they're still banana. All we've ever seen in the history of humanity is variations happen with limits. They've been trying to get faster horses. They got them pretty fast, but there's a limit. They're never going to get a horse to go 500 miles an hour. Never. There's a limit. Now, whether they reach the limit or not, I don't know. I think they're probably getting pretty close on reaching the limit with horse speed or with cow milk production. I got to see in Kankakee, Illinois one time, they happened to be that year the world record producer of milk. I think it produced 100 pounds of milk every day, one cow. That's a lot of milk. Okay, do you think they'll ever get a cow that'll produce 4 trillion tons of milk a day? Or is there a limit in there somewhere? Somewhere there's a limit. Maybe 100 pounds, maybe you might get 105. Okay, but still there's a limit. You evolutionists do not understand. Sure, there are changes, but they're limited. There's 1,000 varieties of bats, and they always make baby bats. There are 4,000 varieties of potatoes, and they always make baby potatoes. Somehow, in your mind, you guys put all this stuff together and think it's a family tree, which means everything is related. I got pictures of that in here somewhere. Here we go, 114. In the mind of the evolutionist, they think animals and fungi and plants have a common ancestor. We see varieties of horses, and they say, oh, see, that proves horses are related to alligators. No, this is religion. I wish I could get you guys to understand there's a lot of different kinds of people. There's black ones and white ones and yellow ones and blonde hair, blue eyes, etc. They're human. There's varieties of birds. There's varieties of crocodiles. But you guys want to connect them all together. Where is the evidence for any animal or plant ever producing something other than its kind? They'd put these charts in the textbooks, draw lines on paper, connecting them.
I should probably stop you there just so we give Planarwalk a chance to respond.
Where has anybody ever seen an animal produce a different kind of animal? What's the best example you know of for an animal producing something other than its kind?
So Nick, go ahead, take your time.
So my question there was, let's say we start off with an animal, I don't know, a rat, for example, right? And we can observe different changes in a rat. Maybe the whiskers get a bit smaller over successive generations. Maybe the arms get a little bit longer, or maybe even the body shape changes, right? My question is, given enough time, is it possible that that rat could eventually change into something that is, you wouldn't recognize it as the original thing? You'd actually say that it's just completely different. Let's say that the whiskers over successive generations completely disappear. The arms get longer. The body itself just gets bigger, and you have more pronounced legs or something. And you don't recognize it as a rat. You might call it a flamboid or something. I don't know. Is that possible?
Well, fair question. Is it scientific is a better question. Nobody's ever seen it happen. We don't see it. You can imagine anything you want, and you can draw lines on paper and connect them all you want, but it's not science. What we see is rats produce rats without exception. You may get a bigger rat or a smaller rat, longer whiskers, shorter whiskers, longer tail, shorter tail. Nobody has ever seen, no farmer in the world has ever seen what you guys dream here by drawing lines on paper. You draw lines on paper between all these animals and say, wow, look, the elephant is related to the rat. That's not science. That's my whole point. I don't care if you guys believe in evolution. That's fine, but it's a religion, and you should keep it out of schools. Nobody's ever seen a rat produce a non-rat. You can dream, and you gave the whole key away at the first sentence. Given enough time, there you go. That's why it is SpongeBob imagination. I'm going to Google right now, how many varieties of rats are there? There may be a whole bunch, okay? But there's still a rat. Nobody's ever seen a rat produce a non-rat. I got lousy signal in here, so I can't get an answer right now. But I bet, Nick, the purpose of the debate is for you to show the best evidence you know of for why this happens. Is your best evidence that given enough time it might happen? That's not science. That's my whole point. Evolution's a religion that people believe in, which is fine, but they should stop calling it science and certainly stop pretending like it's part of science, because it's not. It's just imagination. That's all it is. We just don't see it happen. It's a dream. They think, oh, wow, here we go. Slide number 754, Alt-DV. So I don't mind if somebody has their own religion, but they draw lines on paper connecting the rat and the human and the bird. Nick, do you believe you are related to a rat?
Well, we have a common ancestor, but my question is, can this happen? Because if it can't happen, right, if there is a genetic reason why we can't have a rat change into something that is you would not recognize as a rat, then that's obviously a big problem for evolution, right? If it can happen, then we can go on to the next thing and discuss what the evidence is for that happening. But my question is, can it happen?
According to Live Science, there are 60 species of rat, typically 5 inches, some longer, some shorter, some bigger, and they classify them into 7 different classifications. Okay. I never studied that before. I used to raise hamsters, and we always had baby hamsters. So given enough time, time's not going to help. It's going to make it worse. But all we've ever seen, and you say, what would stop it from going? Apparently there are genetic limits. Like farmers been trying desperately to get bigger cows to get more beef. Okay, you got some pretty big cows. They're still cow. So what would happen? I guess we'd have to say there are genetic limits. There's certainly mechanical limits. Like, could you get a cow as big as Texas? Well, no, gravity would make it where he couldn't move. You're never going to get a cow as big as Texas. There are physical limitations. Here it is, slide number 1042. Oh, no. So there's varieties of horses, and I've mentioned there's a limit. They've been trying to get faster horses for a long time. They're down to 120 seconds to go with the Kentucky Derby. Do you think they'll ever get down to 5 seconds? No. There's bigger and bigger cows, and cows that give more beef, more milk, stand the hotter weather. We talk about the variety of chickens. So the limits would be imposed by the genetics. That's why you're never going to get a chicken that it turns into a reptile, or a reptile turning into a chicken. You can dream it if you want and draw a line between a T-Rex and a chicken, but it's not science. So that's all. I just object, Nick, to them saying we have evidence for evolution when they don't. They have evidence for variation within the same kind, and the Bible says 20 times in the first 7 chapters, they will bring forth after their kind. Nobody's ever seen anything else. I think I believe that. That's science.
So what? I was going to ask, what would those genetic limits be? Like, what is there that would stop us from changing too much in the gene code?
Well, all the gene code changes we've ever seen are harmful or fatal or neutral. Nobody's ever seen an adding of information. There have been many times I'd like to get someplace faster and could use wings on my back. How could I possibly grow wings on my back so I can fly and get there faster? You can't. Nobody's ever observed adding information that's useful. We've seen plenty of mutations. We got some ducks here. They got feathers growing out the side of their head. That's a mutation in the skull. The bones didn't grow together, right? So the feathers grow funny on that spot. Not helpful.
What do you mean? I'm sorry. What do you mean by adding information? Do you mean like more genetic code being added in, or do you mean the information changing, so a new allele?
Well, the charts that you guys rely on show, see home, the charts show everything being connected. Let's see. Oh, no, hang on, 114. So in order, I'm sorry. In order for, let's take this one, which has some type of amphibian turning into a human. What information would have to be added to change a reptile, if they have a 3-chambered heart, into a human with a 4-chambered heart, for example? That would take new information, and we've never seen that. I think there'd have to be some changes to go from a reptile to a bird. Where do you get the feathers? This is new information. Reptiles don't have feathers. Where do you get this information from? The gene code that is the code that builds us, or builds every animal as they grow, is you'd have to have new gene code. Where's the examples of it happening? I'm not aware of any.
Well, because getting from something like a reptile to a human, that would be many, many, many different steps, right? You'd have heaps of different changing of information. When you've got the gene code, it's not necessarily you will always get new information. Sometimes a chromosome may duplicate, right? You might get 2 chromosomes instead of 1, and eventually you'll get to something different. My question would be, is there something? Oh, just trying to think. So is there a mechanism that stops us from, stops a new chromosome from being added or something? Like if we have a chromosome that gets duplicated, is there something stopping that? I don't think there is. In fact, we have, you can have viable offspring that have an extra chromosome. Not always the best thing, but sometimes it can work out.
Well, all we've ever observed if there's a mixing of the chromosomes or a duplication of the chromosomes or something go wrong, it's always been harmful or fatal or neutral. There's all kinds of childhood diseases that kids have that are because of chromosome messing up in the duplication process. Has anybody ever, like this chart in the textbook, Holt Biology, right here on the shelf, shows a reptile turning into a bird and a mammal. Where is the evidence of this happening? You said, slowly over many generations. Stop. That's not science. That's SpongeBob imagination. Make it happen again in the laboratory. Can you give me an example of a human that's improved because of new information in the chromosomes? What's it called? Damien, do you know when there's a duplication of the chromosomes, there's a disease kids get, a condition, I guess, is better than a disease, from chromosome. It's been years since I studied that. I'll get together some stuff on that.
I know my sister has 3 X chromosomes.
Has what?
She's mentally challenged.
Mentally challenged.
She has 3 X chromosomes.
His sister has 3 X chromosomes, and it caused mental problems, deficiency, not an improvement. So that's where you guys can imagine over many generations, but you just left science. That's religion. It's a belief system, which is fine. Keep it, but don't spread it.
I mean, there is also XXY. There's also then X and no extra chromosome there. So there are multiple different things that you can get, which aren't necessarily harmful. I don't know if XXY is harmful. From what I recall, it isn't harmful. But when it comes to new information being added or information making a human better, there is the example of Michael Phelps, the swimmer.
I didn't follow that. The information of what now?
With genetic information sort of changing, there is Michael Phelps, the swimmer, who has longer arms, a whole lot of different things that help him be better at swimming. So there is that's example information helping.
Someone has a chromosome change that gives them longer arms and helps them for swimming. Is it a human you're talking about, or?
Yeah, it's not a.
Phelps, okay, Michael Phelps. I couldn't understand your New Zealand accent. So Michael Phelps has longer arms, which helps him for swimming. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, due to mutations.
Okay. Would you agree? People already had arms before Michael Phelps was born, so there's no new information being added. It's just a changing of information to make longer arms. That's certainly possible. Is there a limit? You think anybody will ever be born with arms 5 miles long?
No.
Okay. So maybe 40 inches. I got longer arms than normal too. Okay. Normally your arm span is the same as your height. Mine is 3 inches longer. So I have longer arms and can swim pretty fast. I was lifeguard a couple summers. So, but I don't think my arms will ever be as 5 miles long. I think there's a limit, and they're still arms. Okay. And when I had babies, the 3 kids turned out to have arms. So what is your point? Is that you think that Michael Phelps is an example of improved added information or modified already existing information? He already had arms.
Yeah, so Michael Phelps is an example of information that was there being changed. Like you'll always start off with information, and then that information can be changed by, maybe something gets duplicated, maybe something gets broken, maybe chromosomes get fused, all kinds of different things that can happen. But over enough time, with enough changes, you'll get something that looks completely different.
You can believe that if you'd like, but that's not observable science. That's why I asked at the beginning, what's your definition of science? If it's standard definition is things it comes from the word seer, to know, Latin word, seer. What do we know? We know dogs produce dogs. We know humans produce humans. We know that. We can see it. We can make it happen. We don't know that dogs and humans have a common ancestor. This chart is pure propaganda on my screen here. We don't know that mammals and birds are related. You can believe that. We know mammals produce baby mammals and birds produce baby birds every time. All of human recorded history, say 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years, human recorded history, every farmer on the planet will tell you birds make birds, cows make cows, humans make humans, no exceptions. And I have a book that I happen to believe very completely scientifically accurate that says they're always going to bring forth after their kind. So the purpose of the debate, the title of the debate actually is, what is the evidence for anything other than that? Why do you believe birds and bananas have a common ancestor? Where's the evidence? I don't think there is any. I'd like to see it. You see changes like his sister with 3 X chromosomes or 3 Y chromosomes, or me with longer arms, or Michael Phelps with longer arms. Is that the evidence? that birds and bananas are related?
Do you not think that over successive generations, if you have enough changes, like we can take humans and other apes, right? And say, okay, well, they all have the same sort of things. The only real major difference is we have bigger brain size, lot less hair, opposable thumbs, but it's all the same information, right? Do you not think that there could be a relationship there?
Well, again, that would be outside of science. All we've ever seen is chimpanzees have baby chimpanzees, orangutans have baby orangutans, gorillas make baby gorillas. Nobody's ever seen this happen. So if you want to imagine it, SpongeBob, that's fine. That's all it is. It's SpongeBob imagination. It's not science. That's my complaint. You guys can believe whatever you want to believe. I don't care. You can believe in video games if you want. Do it. That's not science. Science is what we can observe. We don't see monkeys producing other than baby monkeys. My brother used to raise squirrel monkeys. They always made baby squirrel monkeys, as far as I know. There are no exceptions. So I wish I could get you to understand that you believe in evolution. It is not part of science. There is no scientific evidence. When my son was born, one of my sons was born, he had shorter arms than normal. Normally, again, your arm span is the same as your height. Mine's longer, his is shorter. What does that mean? Could these changes you envision be, you're envisioning positive changes for millions of generations. What if they're negative changes? Is anybody ever born without arms at all? Yeah, they lost all the information. So all we've seen is information transferred generation to generation, and it's generally a loss of information, not a gain. And any gain is the same information, like a duplication of the X or Y chromosome, isn't helpful. It usually causes mental disorder is the biggest thing that is caused from these changes. So that's my whole point of this whole debate series. Where is the evidence of this happening? You guys believe this chart here. You believe reptiles turned into birds. Where's the evidence beside, well, if we had enough time? Stop. That's not evidence. Where's the evidence of any reptile producing anything other than a baby reptile? Go ahead.
So I have a quick question here. What makes humans and other apes not in the same kind?
Well, there are chromosome number difference, obviously. And just counting the number of chromosomes is only the beginning. You can take each one of those chromosomes and do the genetic code on it. Trillions of differences, okay? I could say, this computer has X number of megabytes of information, and this one has the same megabytes of information. Does that prove anything? Oh, exactly what is in those megabytes? I could take two books and say, look, they both got 200 pages. Does that mean they're identical? Well, let's read them. No, just because they got 200 pages, just because we have 46 chromosomes and chimpanzees have 48, that's not proof of anything. Each one of those chromosomes is vastly different information. It's true we both make arms and legs and eyes and hair, etc. That's not proof of a relationship either. I think it's proof of a common designer or a common need. We need eyes to see where we're going. So do chimpanzees. We need hair to keep us warm. So do chimpanzees. We need legs to move us around. So do chimpanzees. It's not proof of relationship. It's proof of a common designer or a common need. Tires on cars are mostly round. They roll better than the square ones. That's why. Go ahead.
So if we had a common... So it is entirely possible, though, that we could have a common ancestor. There's nothing stopping us from having a common ancestor that could have produced humans, and that same common ancestor producing, chimpanzees, right? Because we've all got the same things. We've got 95% similar genetic code, right?
Well, no, let's take one topic at a time. You say there's nothing stopping this from happening. That's imagination. There's nothing stopping Superman from flying by putting his underwear on the outside of his pants. But it doesn't happen. It's not observable. So chimpanzees have never been observed to make anything other than baby chimpanzees. So as far as what exactly is stopping it, I would say it must be a genetic limit. There seems to be genetic limit to horse speed. They got down to 120 seconds on the Kentucky Derby, pretty fast. Get it down to 2 seconds. There's a limit. You don't want to see there's a limit to chimpanzees, big chimpanzees, small chimpanzees. There may be some limits. I don't know how many varieties of chimpanzees there are. I'll Google that later. But they're still chimpanzees. So you see, there's nothing stopping us. This shows your great faith. You're a religious zealot promoting a religion, and you believe chimpanzees could turn to humans. And you don't believe there's anything stopping it. Okay, that's not science, though. We don't observe that. All we observe is chimpanzees making baby chimpanzees. Where's the observation? That's science. That's what I want to see from any evolutionist. Not imagination. Where's the science?
So when it comes to limits, right? Let's take, found fossils of Lucy, for example, right? Is there any limit that stops Lucy from becoming a chimpanzee? Is there any limit that stops a chimpanzee, or is there any limit that would stop a chimpanzee from turning into something that looks very similar to a human?
Okay, well, I don't think you could use any fossil at all as evidence in a court of law. An honest judge, if you brought in Lucy's bones, you laid out the bones on the table, said, Your Honor, here is Lucy. From the Beatles, or whoever was the song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Okay, this is a chimpanzee-type animal, 3 feet tall. Here's the bones. They look similar to humans. We think this is an ancestor to modern humans. Any judge, any lawyer with second-grade education would say, Your Honor, you don't know that these particular bones had any children. Do you know that Lucy had children?
Well, there is the reason why we use fossils. Sure, Lucy, that particular fossil may not have had children. However, it would have been similar to, like, if we find a whole lot of human bones, right? We can conclude that, let's say that there are slightly different. They may not have had children themselves, but their relatives would have had children, or their very similar relatives would have had children, right? Like, I'm related to my uncle, right? My uncle hasn't had children, but I'd be very similar genetically to my uncle because my uncle's sister had a child.
Sure, but my point remains. You could not use Lucy as evidence for evolution. You don't know that one had any children. You certainly don't know it had children that were different. No chimpanzee today can produce children that are different. Why would a bone you found in the dirt count as evidence? No fossil could be used as evidence for evolution. A, you don't know it had any children. B, you don't know it had children that lived. C, you don't know it had children that were different. C, or D, no chimpanzee today can do this. Lucy's not evidence for anything except somebody's got a lot of time to spend digging in the dirt looking for bones. My dog does the same thing. Spends all day digging around looking for bones. Okay, find them. But no fossils count as evidence for evolution. None. So there's no fossil record.
Do you think that Lucy was the only species of whatever Lucy was? Do you think that that's the only fossil and the only?
Oh, if you found 500 of them and lined them up and had little differences, look at this one's got little longer arm, longer. You could line up all the fossils you want. I could line up all the ink pens and pencils in my cup and say, wow, look, this one has a button on top, this one doesn't. Oh, new added information. They're both designed to do what they do. I don't know that they're related. I don't know if they came from the same company. This one doesn't have a button, this one does. Wow, retractable, cool. So if you lined up 500 fossils and they look like they went from chimpanzee to human, that still would not be evidence that it happened. It would be imagination.
Well, we do know that microevolution can occur, right? We know that you can have a mutation that can change your hair color, have a mutation that might change the structure of your bones slightly, might make your arms longer. We know that these can happen. Is it not too much of a stretch to then go, well, if this can happen over millions of years, and the information that keeps on getting changed, right? That carries through to successive generations. Is it not too much of a stretch to go, well, the change between humans and Lucy could have absolutely happened.
Well,
is that too much of a stretch?
Yes, it's a stretch. Even if it did happen, it wouldn't be science because we can't observe it. We see varieties of dogs produced. They cross coyotes and dogs. Wow. They cross wolves and dogs. Wolves and coyotes can mate. Oh, wow. Wolf meets coyote meets wolf. The coy wolf is happening, okay? So there's a variety of dogs. I forget, over 500 now varieties of dogs, okay? 40 subspecies of wolf, wolves of the world. But they're still the same kind of animal. They got 4 legs. They don't have hooves. They don't have horns. They have hair on their body. They have a nose on the front, tail on the back. They're still dog, recognizable as dog. So what we've observed happening, which is what science deals with, what do we know by observation, experimentation, testing? We know dogs, wolves, coyotes are the same kind of animal. They might have had a common ancestor, but it looked like a dog. That does not prove the dog had a common ancestor with a mosquito. So, and you don't have billions of years to work with to begin with, but that's another debate. How old is the Earth? But even if there were billions of years old, it wouldn't help. It would not make your theory any more scientific. We don't observe any animal producing a different kind of animal. 19 subspecies of coyote might have had a common ancestor. Even with a dog might have had a common ancestor. There are 339 breeds of dogs on this chart. Okay. They might have had a common ancestor, but you want to think because we see 339 kinds of dogs, therefore, dogs, do you believe dogs and mosquitoes have a common ancestor?
Okay. I need to ask this question. What makes a kind? Like, what is the definition of a kind?
It's a great question. And what is the definition of species? There are probably 30 different definitions of species. Charles Darwin's book, The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. The Bible says they bring forth after their kind. And I don't think the burden of proof is on me to define that. You guys want to take the evidence of these varieties of dog and then go teach all the kids that dogs and mosquitoes have a common ancestor. So I think dog, wolf, coyote are probably the same kind, but the burden of proof is not on me. What would be the best example you know of any animal producing anything that was a different kind? What anybody would consider a different kind?
So are humans a different kind to chimpanzees?
Absolutely.
Because we can't. Okay. So what about ring species, right? These are species that you have. They came from the same common ancestor, which was fairly recent, but because they've been separated by geography, they are no longer. They've been separated for so long that they've changed so much that they cannot mate with when they meet back up. They just cannot. Right. They cannot mate.
Sure. Well,
would they be just the same kind or different kinds?
Well, a classic example: the Grand Canyon is a divider, a barrier between the squirrels from one side. They have the Kaibab squirrels and the Abert squirrels. We have them stuffed and mounted in our museum up here. They're still squirrel. They probably came from a common ancestor. I think if you took the dogs, you might find that a Great Dane and a Chihuahua would have a hard time mating and producing a baby. If the male is the little one, it can't reach to impregnate the female. If the male is the big one, it's going to kill the little one trying to have the baby. So they probably can no longer mate. They're still dog. They had a common ancestor called dog, but it's not scientific then to say, wow, look at this. Those are different varieties of dog, and they can no longer interbreed. I bet probably biologically, genetically they could, but physically they can't, okay? The Kaibab squirrel and the Abert squirrel are on opposite sides of the canyon. They can't get together, okay? They're still squirrel. But you want to use this as a ring species, which is what you're talking about, that might reach a limit where they can no longer interbreed like Chihuahua and Great Dane, and then say, see, that proves dogs are related to mosquitoes. This is where you guys just don't get it. There are limits. So those are both still dogs, Nick. Look at them. They're dog. A 3-year-old will tell you that's a dog and that's a dog. Won't they?
So what? So if there's so you've said that kind would be something that can bring forth its own, things bring forth its own kind, right? So what is if a kind cannot, if you can have two things of the same kind which cannot breed, then what actually defines a kind?
Well, the Bible says if they can bring forth, they're the same kind. I think you would find that the Great Dane and the Chihuahua could maybe biologically bring forth, if you could do it maybe in a test tube instead of in the uterus of the poor little dog. And a dog, a wolf, and a coyote, they can bring forth, they can bring forth, they can bring forth. They cannot bring forth. So simple question, Nick, do you believe a coyote and a banana are related?
That would be through a long time, but I want to know what exactly is a kind, because if there are some kinds that cannot bring forth after their own kind, then how can we call them the same kind?
Well, I think if we could trace back the lineage, we would discover pretty easily they were able to bring forth and something mechanical happened. Like in the case of the dog and the wolf, they're different. They generally don't interbreed, but they can. They can bring forth. Coyote and wolf can bring forth. Coyote and dog can bring forth. They normally don't, but they can. But I guarantee you, none of them can bring forth with a banana.
So if we go back to, through human evolution, we can find the lineage back to Lucy and then go, okay, well, because we've got the lineage to Lucy and Lucy has a lineage to a chimpanzee, therefore humans and chimpanzees must be the same kind, if that is true, right?
First of all, you got several assumptions in your statement. We cannot go back. If we can go back, we can't go back, okay? So that's not science. And we can't go back through the lineage of anybody beyond a few hundred years. What you know is your grandpa and your great-grandpa. You cannot go back and know for sure you're related to a banana. You can believe that if you want. And we don't know Lucy had any children at all. You got bones in the dirt. That's it. 3 foot tall, obviously some type of chimpanzee. So what? Chimpanzees die all the time today. Do any chimpanzees ever produce offspring that are not chimpanzees? Bible says they'll bring forth after their kind. I believe that's true. Now, I'm not asking for that to be taught at taxpayer expense, but I think that's the most logical scientific answer. And Darwin's book, Origin of Species, only muddied the water. Microevolution, which is what your earlier question, sure, that happens. I don't think we should call it microevolution. We should call it a variation, because calling it microevolution starts to give some credibility to the dumb evolution theory. Changes within a small group of organisms, okay, it's still the same kind. Science can demonstrate dog, wolf, coyote have a common ancestor. I agree. Therefore, should we conclude dog and bird have a common ancestor? No. Dogs and wolves have a common ancestor. Dogs and birds do not. Even if they did, you couldn't prove it scientifically. You could only imagine it. It's not the whole purpose of this debate series is to get you evolutionists who want all of us to pay for your religion to be taught in schools. Where's the evidence that a dog and a bird have a common ancestor? You got the charts in the textbooks, and we all pay for these things, but that's not science. A dog and a human, common ancestor. Do you believe a dog and a human have a common ancestor like this chart shows, Nick? Do you believe that?
We need to start with, things like, things very, well, I'll use the term local, even though that's probably not a great term to use, because, if it's not, if we're going to go back and, have all the fossils that lead all the way back to whatever our common ancestor is, and have all the fossils, that would take a long time. So it's very easy to start with the fossils, that we do have. We've got fossils that show that there is a progression. And if you take this progression from Lucy to, you've got Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalis, and Homo sapien, and a whole lot of other things in between, we can see that there is a progression of bones of something that looks fairly different to humans. There's also a progression of bones of something that looks fairly different to chimpanzees from the same thing. How is this not evidence for evolution?
It's arranging things in order based on a preconceived idea It's not science. We don't observe it. First, we cannot go back. Okay, you can't go back. Secondly, no fossils count, none. All the fossils prove is something died. You don't know that fossil represents an animal that had any children at all. You don't know that.
Hold on. I just want to say, so if no fossils count, we can't tell anything from a fossil, then we can't even tell that something died from a fossil, right?
I didn't understand your verbiage there. What now?
So if fossils don't count for anything, then we can't even tell that something died from a fossil because, it doesn't count, right?
Well, fossils, the fact that fossils are found at all, I think is much better evidence for rapid burial and a flood. See, fossils don't form today. How many animals are going to die in New Zealand today? Thousands and thousands are going to die. How many are going to fossilize? Probably none. Fossils don't form without very special conditions, rapid burial. And the fact that billions of fossils are found with all the parts still articulated. The head is still connected to the neck, and the neck to the body, and the body to the arms. All the bones are in position, sometimes in position of drowning, neck arched back. All the fossils that are fully articulated indicate rapid burial. Fossils aren't forming today anywhere that I know of. So the fossils, I think, all of them represent a flood in the days of Noah.
So you just used fossils to try and bring about a conclusion. You used some data to try and interpret a conclusion from that. And that's the exact same thing that I do with the fossils. I look at them and go, okay, well, these fossils, if we can look and see that there are slight changes, right? And we know that slight changes happen through genetics. So can't there be a slight change from Lucy over successive generations to humans?
Well, first of all, Nick, you do not see any changes in the fossils. You arrange them in an order that you want them to be in. I could put a bicycle which has 2 wheels, and then a tricycle which has 3, and then a car which has 4. It went from 2 to 3 to 4. Is that proof of anything? No, I arranged them that way. There are animals like chimpanzees that are fossilized. There are animals like gorillas that are fossilized. You might find a bigger chimpanzee or smaller chimpanzee. You don't know there's any connection. You don't know they had any children at all. My point is, 2 points. Fossils that are found fully articulated. I mean, today when an animal dies, it gets dragged all over the woods by the buzzards and the coyotes and the ants and the seagulls, and everything drags it all over. So they're not articulated like they are in the fossil record, in the fossil form. In the dirt, we find lots of fossils fully articulated, and I think it's indication of rapid burial quickly. And you don't know that they're connected to anything else. There's a lot of animals alive today in the world. Why don't we see them produce something? Chimpanzees are still having babies. Don't show me the bones from the dirt. Go to the zoo to ask the zoo director, which of these chimpanzees has a baby that is becoming non-chimpanzee? I'd like to see that. It doesn't happen. It's imagination.
Go ahead. When it comes to evolution, it's slight change. Like, you're never going to get something that is, I agree with you that, a human isn't going to give birth to a banana. I agree with you, because the theory of evolution does not say that would happen. What it says is that over successive generations, there are very slight changes. Where one species is completely different, very hard to tell. But if you had a child, let's say they had, shorter arms, right? Then that child had another child with shorter arms, another child with shorter arms, right? And then that child had a child that had their tailbone extruding out a bit more. And then that child had their tailbone was extruding out a bit more. And then let's say that the tail divided in 2. So you had 2 tails. That would be something that would be very different to what it initially came from. And if it happened over a long time, then we can go, okay, well, is it really a human? I mean, it did come from a human, if you go back.
Again, you're not dealing with things we observe happening. Science, look it up. SEER, what do we know by observation, experimentation, and testing? We've been testing a long time, and dogs always make baby dogs. without exception. Dog breeders try to get exotic breeds of dogs, like a toy Chihuahua that people want to, they wouldn't last 5 minutes in the woods. The squirrels would eat them, okay? So the fact that we got these exotic breeds of dogs that man has developed by selecting by artificial selection, sure, but there's a limit. They're never going to get a dog as small as a flea or as big as Texas. There's a limit. But you guys want to draw lines on paper and say that the protozoa, which does not have arms like we do, does not have bones. Where did it get the information to add bones to turn to a human? Where's this new information coming from? There's a lot of differences between a protozoa and a human. Protozoa doesn't have eyes like we do, or ears, or fingers, or skin like we do. But they put these charts out and say, kids, this is science. No, teacher, this is pure propaganda. You don't know that a protozoa turned to a bird and all these animals on here. All they did, Nick, was draw a bunch of lines on paper connecting all the animals. That's not science. We don't observe it. Science is what we study, test, observe, demonstrate, make it happen in the laboratory. As protozoa and amoeba, some of those one-celled creatures have a very short generation time. They get born, grow up, get married, and have babies in 20 minutes. So one person can observe thousands of generations of protozoa. Thousands. They never produce anything besides a protozoa. So who on earth drew this chart that said a protozoa turned into a human, and a lion, and a bear, and a bird? Who drew this chart? Where's the evidence? All they did was draw lines on paper, Nick. This isn't science.
So if you look at that chart, the protozoa didn't immediately, change into a human. It happened successively. So you'd start with a single cell organism, for example, and then eventually that single cell organism might rather than having just splitting into its own other organisms, you might have some mutation that causes it to be two cells to be the same organism, and these two cells to work together as the same organism. Eventually you'll have this organism produce over successive generations. You've got this 2-cell organism. Oh, it turns into 5 cells, 8 cells, 9 cells, 20 cells, right? And these cells all have their own function, which allows the organism to survive better. Humans are great at this. We may not all be the same organism, but we can work with each other to help us survive better. It's an evolutionary advantage, which when it comes to natural selection will select for evolutionary advantages that work better. So I'd say that it is hard to think about what exactly the mutations would have been that would have changed it from a single cell organism to a multicellular organism. But once you've got a multicellular organism, there are a lot of things that can happen there. In fact, from what I can tell, it took about 3 billion years maybe to get from single cell to multicell. So it is difficult, but if you've got 3 billion years, that can happen.
Okay. There are no 2-celled creatures in the world. There are no 2-celled creatures in the fossils. None. There are no 3-celled. In the world today, there are no 3-celled in the fossils. Okay? So you say in 3 billion years it changed, and you said, it's hard to think about what mutations would do this. Well, that's an example. You're admitting that you believe it on faith, Nick. It's a religion. I wish you guys would see it. You should start the Church of the Evolutionists and come down and worship Darwin or whatever you want to do. But it's not science. We don't observe it. There's no 2-celled creatures. Adding 3 billion years isn't going to help. What would that help? Adding time. What are they going to eat all this time? So what you said, once you get a multicellular, stop. You're dreaming. Go back and listen to how many times you used if we had time and, over billions of years. And natural selection works great. It can only select from what's available. You can go through the population of New Zealand and wipe out everybody that wasn't redheaded, okay? Red hair. And you do that 4 or 5 times in a row, and pretty soon the whole population's redheads. You didn't create anything. You selected something already existing. Tell you what, why don't you go through the population of New Zealand and eliminate anybody that doesn't have 3 arms? Oh, well, you're going to wipe out everybody. But again, you're not creating 3-armed people. There aren't any to select from. Natural selection can't create anything. It can only select from what's available. It's not a creative force.
You actually gave a really good example, right? Let's say that we went ahead, anybody that had 6 fingers, we just got rid of them. In fact, that happened. There used to be some people that had 6 fingers. You know, they were seen as, people, horrible stuff, happened there. But that did happen. However, we still have people that have 6 fingers. Not because their parents had 6 fingers, but because they had a mutation that caused them to have 6 fingers. I think it's called polydactyly.
Hexadecimalism. Yep. Right, or polydactyl. Hexadecimalism, 6 fingers. Right, it happens once in a while.
I'm not going to argue with that, but yeah, that does happen. That's from a mutation, right? So,
right.
You can get more things. Like if you were to wipe out everybody that had 2 arms, for example, right? And you had you had few people that only had 1 arm. Eventually, they could mutate and have a second arm. May not be exactly the same as everybody else that had 2 arms, but that is something that can happen.
Well, it's not observed. As far as children born with 6 fingers, that happens occasionally. Usually the doctor simply cuts it off while they're young so that it isn't a problem. But it's not new information. They already had the information to make a finger. It made a duplicate finger on the hand. It's a finger. He didn't make a feather, didn't make a wing, made another finger. This is not an example of evolution. This is a mistake in the gene code, a duplication of information. What if cars coming down the factory, somebody put in 7 radios in the car? Oh, instead of 1 radio, it's got 7 radios. Okay. It's not new information. It's a duplication of information. That's an example of a mistake in the genetic code, and all the mutations anybody's ever seen are harmful or fatal or neutral. Where's the mutations that add information? And if you get 1 mutation that adds information, wouldn't you have to have 2 of the opposite sex in the same place at the same time in history? What if 1 beneficial mutation happened 100 years before the next one? Oh, well, couldn't find a mate. And if you get beneficial mutation of 2 at the same time of the opposite sex in the same location, now they got to take over the population. All the rest of them have to die.
That's not how it works. If you have 1 person that has a beneficial mutation and they reproduce, right, that beneficial mutation will be will end up in all their children, right? And not all their children, but probably half their children, right? If you've got a beneficial, well, roughly, if you've got a beneficial mutation, it means that you're much more likely to survive. We've seen this with things like COVID, where the COVID variants that have beneficial mutations, far more adept at surviving, they end up everywhere, right? The same thing can happen with animals. You have children, maybe you have 20 children, 10 of them have the beneficial mutation. They're much more able to survive. They go off and have kids. Eventually, that particular gene will be all throughout the gene pool. If there is something that requires that mutation to happen, to be useful, like you've got sickle cell anemia in African populations because of malaria, right? So that's far more prevalent than in any other place in the world.
The resistance to sickle cell anemia is a good example. It didn't add any new information. It was a loss of information. And put back in the regular population, they're less likely to survive for other reasons. So where is the example of any mutation that added information that was helpful, other than, well, maybe over millions of years it might happen? You're dealing with SpongeBob style here, Nick, okay? Well, nobody sees it. It's imagination. We don't see it happen. I like science. I'm sick and tired of evolution theory polluting our good science books. It ought to be taken out.
Actually, I'm just going to jump in real quick, Nick, and I want to give you the opportunity to respond. I just wanted to make sure that we were exhausting the topic, and time is flying by. You guys are making it very easy to moderate, very cordial, very respectful. So I do thank you for that. Nick, I was wondering if you wanted to, in the last few minutes of the discussion, before we get to some of these 10,000 audience questions, if you wanted to bring up, you know, I think your other two arguments from the opening statement. But it's totally up to you how you want to, you know, spend or approach the next few minutes before audience Q&A. Go ahead, Nick.
I think it would be good to just stick with the same topic rather than, you know, having it, you know, suddenly switch to another topic 2 minutes before.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a good idea. Okay, go ahead, Nick. Feel free to respond.
Yeah. So a point that I want to bring up is about this. Because the way that you use adding new information is kind of flaky. Like if we get a new finger, right? Yes, it's copying information that was already there. But if we have, there can also be mutations that add in a nucleotide to the DNA, right? Would that be, if a nucleotide gets added, would that be adding new information, or is that just a change of information?
Well, show me it happening. You're imagining again. You're saying if, stop. Science is what we can observe. Who's ever seen this happen? Nobody.
Nucleotides get added all the time.
Well, yeah, but where does it add new information that changes it something dramatic to something else? Do you think that would turn an amoeba to a human like this chart shows? You really believe? Oh, go ahead.
Well, there are multiple different ways to add information. Like a common way is by duplication of information, right? Is that not adding information if you duplicate information?
No. If I said, here's a book on how to fix your car. Oh, better yet, Nick, here's 20 books on how to fix your car. It's the same information, duplicated. It's identical. That's not going to change it to something else. It's duplication of existing information. It's not helpful. It's a waste of energy, but okay.
Okay, so if I duplicate that information, right, and go ahead and make changes, right, to that information, at what point, like let's say you give me 2 books on how to fix cars, and I go, okay, go through one, change it, and eventually it's, I don't know, eventually it's the dictionary, right? Is that new information there, or is it changed information?
Well, that's an example of how it would be new information, but it's not been observed. The book doesn't change from a car fixing manual to a dictionary, and dogs don't change to a different other than a dog. Humans never produce anything but baby humans. The duplication process is very complicated, and it works. So where is the science behind this idea that this chart is based on? They've got all life forms, dinosaurs, birds, whales, worms, amoeba, sharks, all connected to a common ancestor. This isn't science. This is imagination.
We can see that we've got a very, very similar gene code, right? We're something like 50% similar to a banana. And one of the things is that a lot of the DNA that we have is not used. Why would we have, 50%? If we've got 50%, I think we only have 8% of our DNA that's actually active. If 8% of our DNA is active, yet 50% of our DNA is the same as a banana, why would that be the case?
Why would we have 50% of the same information as a banana? First, I don't know that that's true, but let's assume it is. Let's say it's 90% true.
I can't hear.
Maybe it's so that we can eat the banana and digest it and use it. Maybe it has DNA code to make take certain minerals out of the ground and turn it into certain nutrients that our body needs. Oh, maybe God designed a web of life so that the brown cow can eat the green grass and turn it to white milk, and I drink it and get the blonde hair. Wow, that's pretty cool. Maybe it's all evidence of design instead of ancestry.
Well, if they've got if a banana has instructions that it doesn't use, that won't be helpful to you in any way when you eat it.
Well, I think you'll find the instruction manuals on how to fix a car and the instruction manual on how to fix a motorcycle have lots of similarities. I bet nearly all of them tell you turn the screws to the left, lefty-loosey, righty-tighty, unless it's a left-handed screw. So they got the same information. Turn the screw to the left. Is that proof of relationship or proof of that's the way it's designed? Bananas have a lot of DNA code that say it is similar to ours. Okay. Still wouldn't prove common ancestry. You could imagine it if you'd like, but that's not science. We don't see bananas produce banana plants always produce bananas. No, nothing else. Nothing.
The DNA I'm talking about is not used for anything, right? It'd be like if you wrote a book, right, and just had one chapter of random text, right, and then another person wrote a different book and had a chapter of the exact same random text. Why would that occur?
One's copying from the other. If somebody plagiarized is one option. They're both using the same computer, which has a flaw, is another option. But you keep saying, there's DNA that's not used, right? And then you go on to something else. And you keep saying, right, stop. I don't know that there's DNA that's not used. Maybe we just don't know the code for it yet. We don't know what it does. There's been a lot of stuff they thought used to be junk DNA. Now, oh, no, that's not junk. We need that. Whoa. They used to think the appendix was vestigial. No, it's not. There are no vestigial organs in the human body, or any body that I'm aware of. Not vestigial. Some of the animals, like ostriches, have these little wings. They use them for balance while they're running. Oh, okay. So, but even a vestigial structure would not be evidence for evolution. That would be losing, not gaining, if anything. So I don't think that we know that there's DNA that's not used or not needed. You can believe that, and it might be that so far we don't know what it does, but that's not proof it doesn't do anything.
There's heaps of we've mapped out the DNA, our chromosomes quite well, and occasionally we'll find sections just aren't used. Maybe they're used maybe if you turn them on to do something different, sometimes they can be inserted DNA from an ERV, right? But it's just not doing anything. It doesn't necessarily have a use, at least in modern humans. May have had a use in a common ancestor, but not today.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here real quick, Kent. I'm going to give you the chance to respond. I do want to make sure we have time for audience questions. This has been a really engaging discussion, and we've already hit the hour mark in terms of the discussion. So let's do this to be fair. Kent, respond to that, and then Planarwalk, your next response will make it the 5-minute closing. So anything you want to respond to, do it in the 5 minutes. Ken will get 5 minutes, and then we'll get to some audience questions. Go ahead, Kent.
Well, I forgot what the topic was on his now. Let's see. Start that. He said, we know there's DNA that's not used. Stop right there. We do not know that. We know that there's DNA. We don't know the use for it. That I'll go along with. But I think we're just now learning. They just discovered DNA in the last couple hundred years. I mean, I don't think we know all about it yet. And so I think it's a couple blind men groping in the dark trying to describe an elephant here. We don't know what all it does. I think there may be a use for it. Maybe I'll tell you what, if you take out the DNA that you think it doesn't need, you may create a problem later. When they took out things, they used to think, oh, all these things are vestigial. You don't need your appendix. You don't need your tonsils. You don't need your adenoids. Take them out, take them out, take them out. Now they're discovering serious problems by taking them out. Oops, we did need that. George Washington, our first president, was bled to death. They thought, if you're sick, your blood has gone bad. Take out your blood. You'll get better. They had a process called bleeding. They bled him to death. Oops, I guess you do need the blood. So I don't think we know that we don't need all this DNA. We don't know what it does, that's all. But even if it is junk DNA, that's losing, not gaining. That's evidence the original man, Adam, had an incredible DNA code. And we've lost stuff. We've copied and copied and copied and copied this DNA. Tell you what, take any text, run it through the copy machine. Then run the copy through the copy machine. Then run the copy of the copy through the copy machine. You do that 15 generations and you won't be able to read it. Do that 500 generations, and you sure won't read it. And you are probably the 500th generation from somebody back there. And the fact that we can sit here and talk and see and think at all is pretty amazing, that this copy process has worked. So I don't think we know that there's junk DNA. You believe it. And if there was junk DNA, that's evidence we're losing, not gaining. That's digression. That's not evolution. So my point is, we don't see this happening. It's something you believe in. That's all.
Okay, I appreciate that final response there, Kent. Again, this was a ton of fun, and you both gave me a very easy job, kept it respectful, yet sophisticated. So just the way I like it in terms of these debates. So let's do 5-minute concluding statements. Nick, I understand there's probably a couple things you want to address there. So let's wrap things up in the terms of 5-minute concluding statements. Go ahead, Nick.
Okay, so where do I start? When it comes to non-functional DNA, that is DNA that... so essentially what you've got is you've got three nucleotides which signal the start of a sequence of code that can be used to make a protein, right? And then you read until you hit an end sequence. Well, that's what the ribosome does, right? Keeps on going through until it hits an end sequence. And that is what gets used. Any DNA that's after that end sequence isn't going to be used. Now, if you were to take out that end sequence, then you'd eventually hit another end sequence, and you'd get something completely different. Whether that would work or not, I don't know. Sometimes it could work, sometimes it can't work. But that's what I wanted to respond to there. I do want to go back to my initial point, which was what genetic mechanisms prevent macroevolution from occurring over a long time frame. I don't think I got a satisfactory answer. Kent did say that there are limits, right? And yes, there are limits to how fast something can get, but that's not what's happening when it comes to evolution. What's happening when it comes to evolution are small changes, right? Sure, something might get longer, but it's not always going to get longer. If you take Darwin's finches, for example, sometimes the beaks got longer, sometimes they got wider, and this had different advantages and disadvantages. That is what happens in evolution, not just going to the extreme, which is what it seems like Kent is trying to paint it as. And we also didn't really define a kind, I don't think. I'd like to know if there is what kind of definition we can get for a kind. I also want to know if, because last point that I want to say in my closing statement is, if humans cannot produce non-humans, does that make cancer human? Just food for thought. Okay, that's...
Is that it there, Planarwalk?
Yep.
Okay, appreciate it. And let me just restart the timer here. Okay, Kent, we're going to hand it over to you. You have up to 5 minutes. Go ahead.
All right. Well, again, we're back to, throw 5 topics on the table. I don't have time to cover them all. That's why I like the debates one topic at a time. Which one you talk about? Carbon dating? Let's do a whole debate on that. Mutations? Do a whole debate on that. The Bible says the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. It's pretty clear there was a creator for this ink pen. I think anybody with an IQ above 1 would say this had a designer for a purpose, apparently to write things, okay? This one's about out of ink. This had a designer to retract the cartridge. Ah, cool. I think everything we see in every animal and plant that's living shows, wow, this was designed to do what it does. I don't have a problem admitting, wow, there's a designer. I think the invisible things of him, talking about God, are clearly seen. It's clear to me this clock had a designer. I don't think this could possibly happen in a billion years, in a trillion, quadrillion years. Couldn't happen by itself. Clocks can't make themselves. But living things can't make themselves. So I don't have a problem seeing clearly there had to be a designer. Now, which designer? Is it Allah or Buddha or Jehovah? That becomes a different argument. But let's get over the first bump first. There's a God. It's clear There's a creator. They are without excuse. Nick, the Bible says clearly when you stand before God, you're going to be without excuse. You're going to stand there and he's going to read off the list of all your sins, and if they're not paid for by the blood of Christ, you got to pay for them yourself. It says, when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, became vain in their imagination, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they really think they're smart. And I think you feel the same way, Nick. You think you're right, you're smart, you're on the right side. You think evolution is part of science. You think I'm wrong. I understand. You really think you're smart. And anybody else ought to wear the tinfoil hat you got there by you. I know that. You think you're wise. You profess yourself to be wise. But the Bible says you're a fool if you don't believe there's a creator. The Bible says in 6 days, God made everything. I think dinosaurs lived with man. The Bible dates that up to 6,000. The Bible says Jesus said man brought death into the world. God made a perfect world. We messed it up. The pre-flood world was very different according to the Bible. People lived to be 900 years old. There are lots of legends about a golden age. I didn't check to see if New Zealand has legends like that. But there are legends about a time when man used to live to be 1,000. Why would all these legends be existing? I think it's based on a historical fact, okay? Giant fossils have been found. Historical accounts of, anyway, dinosaurs, I cover all that. So I want to get to something else here. The Bible says at the end of time, there would be scoffers in the last days who would walk after their lust. Usually it's a sexual lust, either a lust for somebody they're not married to or a lust for the same sex or whatever all this stuff going on is. There's a lust that causes them to scoff at the Bible. And the Bible says they're going to be willingly ignorant, dumb on purpose of three things: that by the word of God the heavens were of old. They don't understand how God made the world. And they don't understand the world was overflowed with water. That flood, Nick, explains all the fossils. That flood explains all the layers we see. The whole geologic column that we see, all the layers formed in 1 year, one big flood. Doesn't take millions of years. But the scoffers are ignorant of that. And they're also ignorant of the coming judgment of God. There's a judgment coming. So the scoffers are ignorant of the creation, they're ignorant of the flood, and they're ignorant of the coming judgment. Nick, it's my duty, Ezekiel chapter 3, Ezekiel chapter 33, I have to warn you, you're going to stand before God. You want to stand before God and say, I saw a bone in the dirt and it made me think your word isn't true. I saw Lucy and it looked like it had a little bump on something that was different. Jesus said he made them at the beginning. That was the beginning, male and female, Adam and Eve, from the beginning of the creation. So what you believe, Nick, and what you promote clearly is calling the Bible a lie, which is your privilege to do. Clearly it's calling Jesus a liar, which you can certainly do. But the Bible says man brought death into the world. I feel sorry for you judgment day. You're going to stand before a righteous God who's only going to give you what you deserve. I don't want what I deserve. We've all broken his laws. We're sinners. I asked for his mercy and forgiveness. 53 and a half years ago, he gave it to me. Hovind, you're saved. I'll come in, live inside your heart. I'd like to see you give your heart to the Lord. Nick, come on over, visit Lenox, Alabama. We'll give you a tour of Dinosaur Adventureland. You're welcome here anytime, and we'll try to get you converted. But your evidence for evolution, I haven't seen any tonight. The title of the debate, where's the evidence for evolution? You didn't give any. You said, I believe, maybe, if, over billions of years. That's not scientific evidence. So where do you start? Nick, you said, where do I start? Well, you start by surrendering. You lost. You're wrong. You're on the wrong side. Give your heart to the Lord. Go ahead.
All right. That concludes the concluding statements. Gentlemen, thank you for a very fun debate. I think a possible round 2 is in order in the future. Planarwalk is streaming it on his channel as well. And with both channels combined, we've got over 700 people enjoying this heroic debate between Kent and Planarwalk. So, all right, let's get to some of these questions. I hope you guys are okay to be here till tomorrow in order to get to all these. But what I'll do, as usual, all jokes aside, we'll put a timer and we'll get through as many as we can. What we usually do on this channel, Planarwalk, since it's the first time, in order to move along smoothly and be as fair as possible, what we'll do is whoever the question is for, we'll give them the last word. Say the question's for you, you respond, Kent can give his thoughts, and you get the last word. And let's try and keep the responses to max 2 minutes each. That way we can get through as many as possible. So Planarwalk, I've also got some super chats and questions saved from your end. So maybe I'll even start with that. So this is a super chat that came in from your chat. I'll put it up on screen. This one's directed at Kent, more of a comment, and therefore Kent will give you the chance to respond. So this is a $10 super chat for you, Nick, and but questions for Kent. So the questioner says human vestigial organs. So this has to do with the discussion portion on junk DNA vestigial organs. The commenter is saying the appendix, the coccyx, tonsils, wisdom teeth. Kent looks like he's saying those are vestigial. Therefore, feel free to respond however you'd like to.
Right. This is what they used to believe years ago. The appendix is not vestigial. It's part of your immune system. If you take out your appendix, I think the average life expectancy is 8 years less or something like that. So it's true you can live without your appendix. It doesn't mean it's vestigial. You can probably live without both your arms and both your eyes and both your legs too. It doesn't prove you don't need it. So it's not correct that the appendix is a vestigial organ. Somebody taught you something wrong, proven wrong years ago. You got a really, really out-of-date science book. Coccyx, the tailbone. Vanguard, if you think the tailbone's vestigial, I will pay to have yours removed. It's part of your reproductive system. There are little muscles that attach to the tailbone that allow you to make babies, okay? Got nothing to do with having a tail. Part of the reproductive system. Google the muscles that attach to the coccyx, 10 little muscles, I believe, that attach to that is not vestigial, okay? Tonsils are not vestigial, same as the appendix. They used to take them out. It's part of your immune system. It catches the bacteria going in your throat. You can live without it. I agree. You could live without a couple fingers too. It doesn't prove you don't need it. It's not vestigial. Wisdom teeth, I think that's evidence that man used to be bigger. If man was, your wisdom teeth don't come in until you're, say, 14, 16, 18 years old. Sometimes the teeth come in and the wisdom doesn't. Okay, they stay dumb. But it just means a man used to be bigger. If people used to be 8 or 10 or 12 feet tall, by the time you're 15, 16, and still growing, you need an extra tooth to come in to fill in the back of the jaw. It's not evidence for evolution. And if it was, that's losing, not gaining. How's that evidence? It's evidence man used to be bigger. So I'm sorry, there are no vestigial organs, none.
Appreciate the response, Kent. Planarwalk, we'll hand it to you for your response.
Yeah, so I'd say that you don't necessarily need things like your appendix. Like, I know that I'd probably actually do better without my wisdom teeth. Which, if humans used to be bigger, that would be something that would have been changed because with, Kent would call this microevolution, right? Because we've changed only slightly, but it is evidence that we have changed, and maybe it might be in the future that we'll have something that just gets rid of the wisdom teeth. I hope wisdom teeth aren't necessarily fun, but vestigial doesn't mean that you don't have any use for it whatsoever. It just means that it's no longer necessary.
Thank you, Nick. And Kent, question was for you, so you get the last word.
Well, I stand by what I said earlier. There's no evidence. There are no vestigial structures. If there were, that's going backwards, not forward. What he needs is things going forward, not backwards. And so all these things are useful. You can live without them. Like I said, you can live without both your arms too. Doesn't mean it's not needed. It's not true for evolution, that's for sure. So I think they're all evidence of amazing design. Any one of those is so complex. Just your tailbone is more complex than the space shuttle. Look at all the cellular structure in there and the way the muscles and things tie together. There's more. Anyway, it's not vestigial. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. And real quick, I'll announce, looks like Logical, Plausible, Probable is having an after show. So typically the after shows happen late at night. And today we're getting an after show nice and early. So maybe we'll have to do more of these early debates moving forward in the summer. Okay, so here we go. Next question comes in. This time it's for you, Planarwalk. So this one comes in from Vans 182 Workshop. Appreciate the question. So he asks, question for Planarwalk. How did the body survive when the heart hadn't yet evolved? Which came first, the heart, blood, veins, skin, or lungs? How did one survive without the other?
Yeah, so that is something that, well, let's take a banana, right? Banana doesn't need, heart, blood, veins, skin, or lungs. The reason why we do is because long time ago, there was something that was useful that helped us help something to survive. I think it was a simple circuit going through something simple going through the body, which allowed for better digestion of food. Eventually, you get to the point where these things become more complicated, and if you were to take certain things out, like the heart, not going to survive for long. I mean, we need the brain right now, right? You're not going to survive long without a brain, unless you're a flat earther. But yeah, wasn't always.
Thank you. Appreciate the response. Kent, over to you if you had anything to add.
Well, I think that's a great question. And there's so many things called symbiotic relationships. How did plants survive without birds to pollinate them? How did plants, which produce CO2, breathe in CO2 and produce oxygen, how did they survive without animals to take in the oxygen and give off the CO2, reciprocate the gases? There are trillions of symbiotic relationships. I don't think it's possible to give an explanation other than they must have been created within a few days of each other. That to me, now I can't prove that, but that's the most logical explanation. I can't prove who made this thing, but I think it's logical to say somebody made it, okay? And as far as you're not going to survive long without a brain, evolutionists do it all the time. Go ahead.
All right, appreciate it. Appreciate you guys keeping this fun as well. Planarwalk, question was for you. Get the last word.
Yeah, so I'd say that when it comes to these things like symbiotic relationships, it's a response to, if like what's the there's probably, I think there's a saying about this, you catch more flies with honey than a fly trap, right? Where it's like, okay, if you're not going, or no, if you can't beat them, then join them, right? So evolution would have been like, okay, well, this thing is constantly trying to eat. Well, let's make it beneficial for us if it tries to eat us, and that's essentially what has happened.
Okay, appreciate that final word. Next one comes in from, got it up on screen here, Horazio Alarkin. I appreciate the super chat and the question. So question is for you this time, Kent. He asks, what is the difference between imagination and data interpretation? If we see variations happen, can't we project that data to make predictions?
Well, certainly, that's a good question, and within limits we can. They have rodeos in Texas where they ride cows and jump them over fences and see who can jump the highest, okay? And they have competition. Who can jump their cow the highest? Would it be logical to look at the data from 100 years ago, what was the cow jumping record, and the data from 50 years ago and the data from yesterday? Are they able to get the cows to jump higher? Probably so. Probably through maybe through special selective breeding, through more vitamins and minerals, take them to the gym and work them out, make your cow jump higher. Could we project the cow jumping data to therefore conclude, if we have enough time, the cow could jump over the moon? Why not? It's improving. They've seen the Kentucky Derby, the horse is getting faster and faster. They've dropped off 7 seconds in the last 100 years off the winning speed. Okay. Well, let's project the data for 5,000 years. Eventually, the horse can run around that track in 2 seconds. Obviously, anybody that studies this type of thing will say, yeah, you can project data, but be careful. You're going to reach a limit. I think they've pretty much reached a limit on cow milk production for cows, 100 pounds a day, utterly ridiculous. But there's probably close to a limit. Could we take the data for anything, anything you want to take? Horse speed around the track, milk production for cows, cows jumping over a fence. Take a look at the Olympic records for anything. Weightlifting. What was the limit for pressing weights 100 years ago? Has somebody broken that record? Probably. Does that mean eventually man can lift, 1 trillion tons? No, I bet there's a limit. So, Horatio, good question, but I think you need to stop and think. The limit, there are physical limits, there are logical limits, and science is what we can observe. We observe, bang, you run into a brick wall. You can't get the horse to run around the track any faster than 120 seconds. So far, that's the brick wall. So observation. Science comes from the Latin word seer. What do we know? Knowledge. We know dogs produce dogs. Have they gotten the smallest dog they're ever going to get with the toy Chihuahua? I don't know. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the limit. Why don't you get one as small as a hamster or a flea? Yeah, there you go. So they wouldn't eat much, wouldn't poop much, so that'd be a good dog to have, one like a flea, if you could find it when you call it. So I think that science deals with what we can observe. So be careful with extrapolating, because obviously you can go crazy on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. Planarwalk, over to you for your response.
There's a lot to delve into there. The idea with data interpretation is given a whole lot of sets of information, what is the conclusion from that, right? So, like if I can, for example, I can see that Kent has a cross on his screen. He has a cross on his hat. From that, I can interpret that he is a Christian, right? Now, I could be wrong about that, right? It could be that he's an atheist trying to make fun of Christians. And who knows? He might be. Unlikely, but that could be what's happening. That's what data interpretation is. The conclusions can be wrong, but it's up to more evidence to come along and say, hey, look, your interpretation there is wrong. And that's what data interpretation is.
Thank you for the response there, Planarwalk. Kent, question was for you. Get the last word.
Well, they've been working hard to breed the world's smallest horse. They came to our Dinosaur Adventureland 20 years ago. It was pretty tiny, okay? I bet there's a limit on how small horses can get and how big horses can get, and as I mentioned, on the fastest speed. They've dropped from an average of 127 down to an average of 123, shaved off 4 seconds in 100 years and billions of dollars spent on the dumb Kentucky Derby, okay? But they've reached, maybe they've reached the max or getting close. So I think all of human observation would say, look, there's a limit. You might get a variety of chickens. You're going to get a chicken every time, guaranteed, okay? We raise chickens here. We got all kinds of them. They're still producing chickens. So I think all we see, science is what we see and know. The purpose of this debate is to say, where's the evidence for evolution? He can say, I believe if we had billions of years, we could interpret the data. That's not science. You just left science and went to imagination, which is fine. You're welcome to do that. But quit calling it science and quit putting it in the textbook. It's not part of science. It belongs in a religion class.
Thank you for that final word, Kent. Okay, this one comes in from your end, Planarwalk, super chat from your live show. And Neon Sowell. So question for you, Kent. So by your logic, I guess going back to the vestigial organs argument, question, response, humans were made by God with tails in mind. Vestigial tails, in brackets, not just the tailbone, are a thing. So God designed us to lose it, question mark.
Well, the question assumes that we had one and lost it. No, we didn't. The tailbone attaches 9 or 10 little muscles that are part of the reproductive system. Okay? I won't go into any more detail, but Google it for yourself. If you think man used to have a tail, you're welcome to believe that, but that's not science. It's not observable. We observe you have tailbones that have 9 muscles, and they're very handy and useful. And that's it. End of story. So if someone wishes to believe otherwise, that would be their religion, not a science. So I don't think, the question assumes God designed us to lose it. We never lost it. He designed it just like it is. It works great.
Appreciate the response, Kent. Planarwalk, over to you.
Yeah, so when it comes to, I find it funny that some humans do actually have tails, and it shows that the tailbone itself may not necessarily be needed, right? There may be some things around the tailbone that could be redesigned, to use lack of a better word, but that could be something that later on, thousands of years from now, because our tailbone's no longer needed, it just drops out of the gene pool. That could be something that happens. When it comes to all this kind of stuff, it's not that these things have no use because they have, because they're completely useless. It's that they have no use because the things that they help with are often could be redone.
Appreciate it, Planarwalk. Kent, over to you. Final word.
Well, the textbooks frequently say the coccyx is vestigial, has no present function, and is proof that we used to have a long tail. And we lost it because we didn't need it. I say, whoa, it'd be handy to have a tail. You ever come to the door with 2 sacks of groceries and wished you had some way to hold turn the radio knob and drive the car, or open the door? It's one of the lies I cover in my video series number 4, Lies in the Textbooks. There are no vestigial organs. If there were, that's the opposite of evolution. That would be losing. The tailbone is part of your reproductive system. Google it for yourself, okay? So it's not vestigial, but if whoever did the neon owl thinks it's vestigial, I'll pay, have yours. Better yet, we can save all the money. I have a Swiss Army knife right here oh, it fell out. It's on my floor here. I'll take it out myself. I know right where it's at, okay?
Okay, here's another one that comes in from, this one comes in from Pegasaurus. Again, this one, Planarwalks, from your live chat. So question for Kent, another one for you, Kent. Please define a kind. I couldn't quite figure out what you meant during the debate. So comment with a question.
Well, thank you, sir. Good question. And the burden of proof is not on me to do that. The purpose of the debate is, where's the evidence for evolution? Nobody's ever seen that. But the Bible says 20 times in the first 7 chapters, they will bring forth after their kind. So I think any 2 creatures that are able to mate and bring forth live offspring are the same kind. Our horses, they'll show no interest whatsoever in the cows up there. We have them all together. The llamas show no interest whatsoever in the pine trees. They both are bringing forth. Pine trees are bringing forth baby pine trees, and llamas are bringing forth baby llamas. They show no interest in each other, and they're probably not capable of bringing forth. I think a llama and a pine tree are a different kind. So the biblical definition is, can they bring forth? Can they produce offspring? Now, that certainly would make it the same kind. I think you'd find that a Chihuahua and most of the dogs could be all the dogs would be considered the same kind. Even dog, wolf, and coyote, I showed you, they can bring forth. They're the same kind of animal. It's a dog in the dog family. Now, man has decided to classify them with, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. I don't think the dog cares how we classify it. When the dog gets ready to mate and make babies, he looks around for another dog. All of them. No, without exception. We've got our chickens and ducks in the same pen. The roosters don't even look at the ducks. They look for a chicken, a hen, every time. So can they bring forth? They're the same kind.
Thank you for the question, Pegasaurus. Thank you for the response, Kent. Nick, over to you if there's anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I find that this bringing forth after their kind. Now, I do want to. I feel like there's a lot more to it, because we did discuss ring species, and would agree that, well, we can say that ring species are the same kind because they had a common ancestor. But we can look at all kinds of things, like are donkeys and horses the same kind? Well, Kent would probably say yes, they are. Are bananas potatoes and nightshade or deadly nightshade, are they the same kind? Are Brussels sprouts and broccoli, are they the same kind? And if they are, why? If not, why? That's what I'd say.
Appreciate the response, Planarwalk. Kent, question was for you. Final word.
Well, those are good questions. And again, they're trying to shift the burden of proof. Where's the evidence for evolution? I would turn it around and say, are potatoes and nightshades the same? That's a good field of research for science to get into. Are potatoes and elephants the same? You guys have charts showing potatoes and elephants having a common ancestor. That's not only not science, it's stupid. Quote me on that. Go ahead.
All right, we got a question now for Planarwalk. So Planarwalk, this one comes in from Redefine Living. Looks like it has to do with a specific topic you gentlemen discussed during the debate itself. So Redefine Living, appreciate the question. He asks, the hereditary disorder that Michael Phelps has, Marfan syndrome has detrimental side effects. Why is this evidence for evolution over devolution?
Yeah, so the devolution isn't really a thing, right? Just because something has negative side effects doesn't mean that it's de-evolution. Like if you take sickle cell anemia, for example, yeah, that can have negative side effects, but in certain areas of the world, it is actually far more useful to have that than to not have that. This idea of de-evolution is because people think of evolution as a straight linear progression. It's not. It's a web of different factors that cause different features to be more useful than other features.
Okay, thank you for the response there, Nick. Kent, over to you if there's some points you'd like to add.
Very interesting. I'd never heard of Marfan syndrome. I'll look it up here. I'm trying to do it now. We have lousy reception in Linux on a good day, and today's a bad day. It's clouds and metal roof. So I'll do some research on that. But again, it didn't add any information, and that's not going to change a potato to an elephant. I just object to them calling evolution science. That's not. It's a religion. I don't think Nick has offered any evidence of any animal producing what anybody would consider a different kind. Tell you what, get a group of first graders together, line up animals, and they'll be able to tell you which ones go in the same kind. Dog, wolf, yep, same kind. Dog, banana, no, not the same kind. So I think it's common sense 101 until you go to college for years where they learn to twist your brain around to where you think a dog and a banana are related. If you didn't have that brainwashing, you could still think clearly on the topic.
Appreciate it, Kent. Planarwalk, question was for you. Get the last word.
Yeah, that's where it comes to defining kind, right? Like, because if I want to be able to say, okay, this has produced a different kind, I need to know what the definition of kind is to be able to do that. If I don't know what the definition of kind is, well, I can't do that because the definition of kind will always be able to be changed, or any evidence that I can give, well, that's not a different kind. So yeah, that's...
Okay, appreciate it. Next question comes in from Powell. Question for Kent. If one person has a mutation that his color is blonde, so a mutation that I guess makes a hair color blonde, did person has to find someone with blonde hair to reproduce? If not, why?
Well, I don't think what color hair has anything to do with reproduction. So no, you can mate with somebody with a different color hair if you'd like. Okay. Marfan syndrome is a life-threatening condition. Wow, I'm going to do some more reading on that. So it's not a beneficial mutation. So no, the color of your hair has nothing to do with whether you can make babies or not. I think male and female would be important. And there's only two genders. The stuff about you can envision, just imagine you're a hamster. Okay, I think that's stupid. But so I think all the mutations we've seen are harmful, fatal. If it involved a mutation of the reproductive system, you might not be able to have children at all. So let's see, did the person have to find blonde hair? Answer, no. I think we demonstrated that worldwide. You can see worldwide, people, different color hair, get together, make a baby, no problem.
Appreciate it, Kent. Planarwalk, over to you. If there's anything you'd like to add, go ahead.
Yeah, like if you have blonde hair, you don't have to find someone else with blonde hair to reproduce, and that gene may continue on being spread throughout the gene pool.
Go ahead, Kent. Final word.
Yeah, no, hair color has nothing to do with it. Like I said, opposite sex would have everything to do with it. Tell you what, show me a male and a male produce a baby, or a female and a female produce a baby. That has something to do with it. But hair color does not.
All right, appreciate it, gentlemen. So here we go. We'll start winding it down now with a final question or two. And I do want to thank the audience, though, both audiences, for the ton of questions that have come in. Very, very engaged audience today, that is for sure. So clearly this has been a much anticipated debate. You guys did great. So $5 super chat comes in from OF Lemio to both debaters. So question for the both of you. What is the definition of science? Since it is for the both of you, I'm not sure who wants to answer first. Anybody want to jump at the opportunity? Nick?
Okay, yeah, I'll science is basically a way to collect knowledge, right? So if you have, you start by having making an observation, right? This could be an observation of things fall to the ground, and it's like, okay, why does that happen, right? And so there's experiments and all kinds of different things. Now, one of the misconceptions that a lot of people have is they think that there's one way and one way only to do it. No, there's heaps of different ways. The way that science works in chemistry is, it's with chemistry, you try and work out, okay, what's this chemical and this chemical going to produce. You can work out using. I used to do chemistry quite a bit, but I've forgotten all the terms. But, equal equation has to be the same on both sides. You can do that kind of stuff. When it comes to, physics, it's like, okay, why does this fall to the ground? Well, what if it's because mass attracts mass? You do an experiment to find that out. When it comes to where did we come from? That is another question. So it's like, okay, well, what different ideas can you have? And one of the ideas that was put forth is natural selection. So it's like, okay, if natural selection is true, what should we expect to see? And we expected to see things like birds with like the finches, them being completely different. And it's like, okay, that's evidence for it. May not 100% confirm it, but it's evidence for it. And you can't 100% prove anything because that's not how science works.
Thank you, Planarwalk. And Kent, question was for the both of you, so go ahead.
Well, the word science comes from the Latin word seer. What do we know? Knowledge. Knowledge. What do we know? We know dogs produce dogs. We know that based on observation. I agree. Observation, experimentation, and testing. All the observation of all of recorded history says dogs produce dogs. Nothing else. Cows produce cows. Nothing else. If he wishes to believe long ago and far away he's related to a cow, okay, but that's not science. Science says, what do we know? We know humans produce humans, and birds produce birds, and reptiles produce reptiles, and ladybugs produce ladybugs. We do not know that they have a common ancestor. So a very simple question, Nick, just for the record books here. Do you believe you're related to a ladybug? Do you have a common ancestor with a ladybug?
So I'd say that I think that the evidence points to us having a common ancestor with it, because the best explanation for us for us being where we are is that evolution occurred. And here's one of the things that I didn't mention. I have no problem with if you want to say, okay, evolution occurred, but it was guided by God. It's just that all the evidence that I've seen says that evolution occurred. Whether it was guided by God or not, maybe it could have been, maybe it couldn't have been. But that's another question that we can't really test.
All right, gentlemen, you know what? We just hit the 2-hour mark. So, we should wrap it up here. I do appreciate all the questions. I appreciate, how cordial the debate was between Kent and Planarwalk. I do appreciate your time. And why don't we just do some final words, final thoughts? Again, I do want to thank you guys for doing this. Planarwalk, let's start with you. Again, your first time on the platform. Final thoughts, final words before we close it down.
I think I've gotten most of my thoughts out. I'd just say that it was lovely being here. Thank you for setting this up. And I appreciate Kent being cordial through this discussion. And yeah, I'll definitely think about some of the things that we've talked about today. And because often when you have these discussions, you got to think quickly, and so sometimes it's not easy to think on the spot. And yeah, I'm not sure if that's a great thoughts, but that's what I'm going to go with.
No, that's great. Appreciate those final thoughts. Glad to have you here for this debate. You guys made for a very fun debate. So, Dr. Hovind, over to you, brother. Final words, final thoughts.
Well, thank you, Nick, for doing this. It's difficult to find opponents who want to defend their theory in front of somebody they're not giving a grade to or can fire them. So thank you for doing this, and we'll do it again anytime. Come visit Lenox, Alabama. Final simple question, Nick. If you died today, what would happen to Nick? Do you simply cease to exist? Is there anything more than just the body? Is there a spirit, a soul? Where are you going when you die?
When I die, I don't know. Like, it seems like, from what I can tell, I'm going in the ground. Then there will be, I'm not sure how long it will take, but eventually there will be creatures that my body will be decomposed. Well, not necessarily creatures, but like different organisms that will decompose my body. As for if there's some kind of afterlife, I don't know. I haven't seen any evidence of an afterlife because, as it turns out, finding evidence for an afterlife is actually rather difficult because, it's not something that's very It's not something that's really falsifiable yet. So I would have no idea what's going to happen after I die, apart from being decomposed.
All right. If that's where we're going to end it, I appreciate it again. Kent, Planarwalk, I am going to let the both of you get out of here and enjoy the rest of your day. Kent, typically you're going to bed right after a debate, but I'm guessing you got a full day ahead of you at this point. So thank you. And I'll be back just for a couple minutes of announcements and reminders. But Kent, Planarwalk, we will chat soon. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right, there we go. It's just me now. Another one in the books. Time flew by. I mean, that was a ton of fun, very engaging, and I'm glad we got to host this debate, and this debate got to happen. I've been pumped for this one for a while, and both Nick and Kent made my job very easy, which I am very thankful for. So as everybody knows, this is a lot earlier, than the usual debates we do in this challenge. We usually do them at night. And this was great, though. This was a ton of fun. I think we're going to start scheduling a few more around this time. Definitely a good time to host a debate. And then we get the whole day ahead of us. Looks like John's having an after show. So head over to John's channel if you're interested. So I did want to just give everybody a reminder. We do have a ton of debates coming up. We're actually going to be doing double headers. I got so many requests coming in. We got debates on all sorts of topics. So again, for the summer, we are going to be doing double headers. So again, I think just in 5 or 6 days, Atheist Junior, Dr. Dino, Evolution is on trial. Atheist Junior is going to be doing something similar as well that we did tonight. He'll be simulcasting it, and pretty cool. I like that. So any other evolutionists that want to do a debate, just know, you can definitely double stream it to your channel too. So we'll have 2 live chats rocking. So here we go. Wade the Wizard, Dr. Dino, Endgame. That's coming up. Kent, Snake was right. That is, this will be specifically on transitional fossils. So that's coming up as well, with Snake being the one who debated Professor David McQueen, our team geologist, yesterday. That was a fun debate. Fossil record best explained by Old Earth or Young Earth. So if you haven't yet seen that, please do check it out. And of course, the epic round 2 T-Jump we just scheduled. T-Jump and Kent. That was a huge debate, heroic debate. That was one to remember. So we got round 2 coming up. That'll be in July. So end of July. Guys, this is just a snapshot of the overall debates that we do have scheduled. So please make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit that like button, share it around. Critical thinking is important. That's why we host these debates. And just a few days ago, we had the big salvation debate, 2 powerhouses in the world of soteriology, Bob Wilkin, Robert Sungenis. And this one did not disappoint. So we've had this scheduled for 3 or 4 months, and this one was huge. So if you have not yet seen it, please do check it out. It was comprehensive. It was fast paced, tons of cross exam, and I do want to make sure people check that one out. Okay, well, I think that's pretty well all that comes to mind. Again, just a snapshot of the overall debates that we have scheduled. We have debates on the Trinity, so the nature of God. soteriology, as well as the Bible translation debate, the controversy, King James only controversy. So, yeah, just make sure you're subscribed, and that way you won't miss out on these awesome debates this summer. Okay, I am going to wrap it up here and get a refill on my coffee, and I may just head on over to the after show. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks to both audiences today, this afternoon. And Standing for Truth is out. God bless.